Hello there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Ian, and joining me today from immersiveaudioalbum.com is Jonathan Cornell. Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. How you doing today?
Doing good. Glad to be back.
Good to have you. So, today we're going to talk about immersive albums, multi-channel albums in, live albums that have been released in multi-channel. I believe we're going to cover 5.1. We're going to cover quad, and we're going to cover Dolby Atmos. And kind of the impetus behind this discussion was the release of Deep Purple's Made in Japan. And I started thinking about how until relatively recently, there's been like little things here and there, but we haven't gotten like a lot of these really classic live albums and multi-channel until like the last couple of years. And like within the last 2 years or so, we've gotten like Bursting Out by Jethro Tull. We've gotten Playing the Fool by Gentle Giant. I'm starting to give up our list a little bit here. But this album, Made in Japan, is significant because it's not the first live album. There were, of course, many before that. But this is perhaps the most iconic and influential live album because it was one of the first double live albums. And this became like an institution in the 70s. All major artists were releasing these double live albums. And back then they sold really well. I just be honest, like I hadn't heard this album, Deep Purple's Made in Japan, prior to the Atmos mix, but I had several folks write me who knew my tastes and they were like, Ian, you need this. And I was like, yeah, but it's like $60. And it's like, no, but you won't regret it. And the truth is I don't regret it because this is a fantastic mix. I just want to talk a little bit about it. Now, are you familiar with the original mix of this, Jonathan?
Yeah, I do have the original double LP, but like the record that was in my dad's collection that he loved was Machine Head. So
Right.
that was kind of like the Deep Purple that I knew growing up. And I heard this like you more recently.
Cool. Because like I had Machine Head on vinyl as a teenager, and I really liked it, but I had never really explored Deep Purple further. And I was listening to this mix, and when Child in Time came on, it's like a perfect title because it took me back to being very young and hearing that song on FM radio at night. And it was just like a transportive experience back to my youth. And I was like, wow, I didn't know that was Deep Purple. This is sweet. Let's talk about this mix a little bit. What impresses me is that much like the Pink Floyd at Pompeii mix, this is very sparse. This is 8 tracks. You could argue that there's not enough here to go immersive with. But personally, I really like these kind of more subtle, sparser Atmos mixes because I feel like there's more space for things to live in. And if you read Steven's liner notes, I think he describes it perfectly. Like you are in the front row of a Deep Purple concert, and the band is in front of you. Maybe you might get some guitar or special effects keyboard stuff in the heights, but you can hear like the audience is behind you. Like you're in the hall, you can hear reflections and stuff off the back wall, but he is flying some guitar solos and stuff in there too to just add to the immersion factor. So what did you think of this mix, Jonathan?
Well, in the liner notes, like he says exactly how the multi-track broke down, which is interesting. So it was recorded on 8-track, but all the instruments are in mono except for the drums.
Drums are in stereo. Yeah.
Drums are on a stereo pair, and there's a stereo like audience, venue mic, which kind of fades up, between the tracks when there's audience noise, and then it sort of goes down during those songs. So there's really only 6 elements to mix into, 11 speakers on a 714 setup. So how do you mix that in surrounds? And I think the compromise he came up with is good because if you think about like, it would be strange to have the drums and, lead vocal in front and then like the guitar and keyboard all the way in the back.
Right.
So what he ended up doing is if you have a 714 system, the Ritchie Blackmore's guitar is mostly in the left side speaker, but not totally in it. It's still like attached to the front. And John Lord's keyboards are in the right rear speaker, also sort of attached to the front. So it feels like you're sort of on stage with the band wrapping around you, but it doesn't pull too much energy out of the front. No. So I think it works really well. And like you mentioned in a couple of the songs, like in Lazy and Space Truck, and there are parts where like the keyboard or guitar flies around, and that's fun. I enjoy that stuff.
Yeah. And I'm on a 5.2.1 system, right? Yeah, because that's I always get
5.1.2.
Right. Yes, because it's a 5.1 system with the height speakers. But I'm fascinated by how he mentioned that he did add artificial reverb, because there is on the original mix. But that's mostly what's going into like the ceiling speakers. How is that effect on a full system?
Well, it's the reverb is probably stereo, but it's suspended between, if you have 4 height speakers, it just comes out of both of them.
Oh, that's cool.
So like the left channel is in the front left and rear left, and it sounds very immersive.
Yes. I would agree. And I would say that the easiest comparison is Pink Floyd at Pompeii. It's a very similar effect to me. And even like Bursting Out kind of has that sort of wraparound effect. Even in my system, I can feel that thing just kind of like floating in from the sides to the back. I did have a chance to listen to the original mix, because there is an excellent transfer of the original mix on this. And this was always a great sounding album to begin with. So, it's no surprise that it's a great sounding Atmos mix. But what's always the concern is that you're going to lose that glue. Like that really important glue, especially for a rock album. And I feel like this never does. I mean, it cranks up so great. Ian Gillian's voice sounds fantastic. The dynamics are really, maybe improved. Like, I feel like there's some things in this mix that are just barely audible. Like, you have to turn it up really loud to get the full effect. But then like for instance, like Child in Time, when he comes in with those dynamic screams, it's just like, wow, peel and paint stuff. But yeah, I wanted the opportunity to talk about this because, I don't feel like I'm qualified to do a full review because I haven't heard all the different variants of it that have come out over the years. But, this was, where the idea started to do a multi-channel, live albums discussion. And, I just wanted to tell anybody who's watching, listening, interested, go check this out. Now, you did mention that some folks have had some criticisms against this mix. Did you want to summarize that? Like, what some of the criticisms are?
I don't know. I mean, I've read a couple of comments that people think like the guitar is a little bit low in spots, things like that. I mean, I haven't experienced any of that on my system. I mean, I think it sounds great. Like you said, great dynamics. The spatial spread is about as well as you could do, considering the limitations of the multi-track elements.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're quad heads, so like, limitations can be fun and can add to creativity.
Well, I think kind of the primary, point of discussion we're gonna, get into in this video is whether, when you're mixing a live album in surround or Atmos or whatever, do you want it to sound like you're in the audience watching a concert, or do you want it to sound like you're sort of on stage with the band with actual instruments behind you? And, just like how people have different opinions about how far you could go mixing studio albums in surround, like what kind of elements are appropriate to put in the back or height speakers. There's, a lot of opinions about whether people think that, mixing a live concert should be more of like a natural sounding thing. I mean, my opinion, and I think you agree with me, is that if you're going to be, sitting in your living room in the sweet spot, like you might as well make it a fun experience and do something different that you couldn't do when you're actually going to see a concert. Yeah. Because when you go to see a show, all this, unless you go to see an artist who has a, like multi-channel PA. And I know Steven Wilson has done some tours in the past with quad sound.
And Pink Floyd did too in the
back
70s.
in the 70s. Yeah. But for the most, in most cases, it's just front of house and you're sort of feeling the audience around you. So it would be easy to mix it like that. And a lot of live DVDs do have surround mixes that are approached that way. But I always think it's cool to sort of go beyond that and make it kind of a unrealistic but fun experience.
Right. The way I would put it is I like to be placed inside of the live album as a live album. So like put me in the audience, but put me in the band too. Like it doesn't necessarily need to be a naturalistic representation.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, make it's like taking a studio album, making it 3-dimensional. Well, just take the live album, make it 3-dimensional. And I think that, you know, for a while, Wilson was very hesitant about doing live recordings, and I understand why. And I think it was probably that very thing. But I think he's done a great job of placing you within the headspace of these live albums. So what's your next pick?
All right. So, well, obviously it's nice to introduce it. We're going to do our picks. We each picked our 10 favorite live
10-ish.
10-ish. Yeah. For me, it's 10. I don't know for you. But the first one I'm going to talk about is the Eagles farewell tour live from Melbourne, which was released in, I think, 2005 or 2006. There's a couple different versions of this. There's a 2-disc DVD set. There's a Blu-ray, which is what I've got. There's also there's an HD DVD. Remember those? Blu-ray won that format war.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny that this is called the farewell tour because, as we know, the Eagles continued touring for many years after 2005. They're still touring now. They're playing at the Sphere. But this is a pretty cool release, and one of the reasons why I picked this one is because it was mixed by Elliot Shiner, who's one of my favorite surround mixers. And he worked on a bunch of different projects for the Eagles, including another live record called Hell Freezes Over that was released in the mid-90s. That was like when the band first got back together after like a very long breakup. But one of the things that's cool about, Elliot Shiner's approach to mixing live albums is, we were just talking about this idea of, do you make it like a fun experience or do you make it, like you're at the concert? His approach is kind of like, well, if you watch the video, you'll see that there's a lot of musicians on stage at this concert. There's the Eagles themselves, which is like, 4 or 5 guys. And then there's this whole back row of other musicians. There's like a 4-piece horn section. There's a piano and keyboard player. There's several percussionists. And the approach in the 5-1 mix is like, let's put the Eagles in the front and like everybody else in the back. And there's absolute separation between the front and back speakers. So it's not like in the Steven Wilson mix of Made in Japan where there's things like mixed a little further back. Like there's things all the way in the back in this concert. Like if you listen to some of the songs, like the horns are completely in the back. There's keyboards and piano coming completely from behind you. I mean, it's mixed basically like a studio record. And I would say it's perhaps more extreme in its separation than some studio mixes. And, if you're a fan of the Eagles, they do all the hits on this. It's got Hotel California. It's got Take It Easy, Already Gone, all the famous songs, and a lot of like solo stuff. Like, Joe Walsh does Rocky Mountain Way.
I was going to ask if Joe is in the band here.
Yes.
Cool. He's my favorite Eagle. What can I say?
Yeah. And the track list is like, like I said, it's a mix of solo and live stuff. And I think there's like 30 songs on it. So they had to split it over 2 DVDs for the DVD version. But for the Blu-ray, they were able to fit all 30 tracks on one disc. So that's one reason I would recommend the Blu-ray over the DVD, aside from the fact that it's also the lossless audio.
Yeah.
But as far as surround mixes of live albums go, this is one of the most adventurous ones you'll find.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard this one, but just the way you've described it, like with the horns in the back, it kind of sounds like Chicago. Like that's how a lot of their multi-channel mixes are.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, as you know, in the original Eagles studio albums, there are not horns in any of their songs. So it does. Yeah. The arrangements are a little bit different on some of the tracks, and that puts an interesting spin on it because, everybody's heard Hotel California like 1,000 times. So, right. Yeah.
And let's talk about one of the greatest live albums ever, and that's Stop Making Sense by the Talking Heads. And I was just watching this last night, so it's very fresh in my mind. But what I think is fascinating about this is that there's actually 2 Atmos mixes. There's the movie soundtrack, which has its own idiosyncrasies and kind of needs to fulfill. And there's the just the audio only experience, which of course you can hear on streaming. And I think maybe the Talking Heads themselves released a Blu-ray of it. And your hosts today, I've heard the 4K mix, and you've heard just the audio mix. So that I'm interested in the 2 perspectives here. And what's fascinating is that they kind of took like a Martin Scorsese approach to this, where if David Byrne's on, if he's being featured on camera, they will raise up his rhythm guitar so you can hear it. They'll bring it up. But if like one of the keyboard players is playing, they'll bring him up. And it's not like it's kind of like a mixture. Like you do feel like you're mostly in the audience and things are very much up front. But at times, like there's a song, and I can't remember if it's which one it is. It might be Life During Wartime, but somebody plays a solo, keyboard solo, and Byrne is running around the stage. And as he's running, the keyboard solo is following him. The placement of it is following him around the room, which is really cool. So if he's backstage, the keyboard sound is behind you. If he's like front right, well then it's going to be in the front right height speaker. But that's really exciting. Now, is the audio only mix like that, or is that something specific to the film?
I don't remember offhand if that thing happens in Life During Wartime, like you said, where it moves around. But I do remember thinking like it is a fairly adventurous mix. It's not like the Eagles one where there's things like, mixed hard pans at the back, but you do get the sense that there's more than just like the venue sound behind you. Like it does feel like the music is wrapping around the room. There was also, I believe, there was a 5.1 DVD that came out some years earlier that has another different surround version of it. But you bring up another thing which is interesting, because on our lists, some of these albums have video and some of them don't. Like obviously for something like Made in Japan, like that wasn't filmed. They only captured the audio. And in the case of most of the vintage albums we're going to talk about, I think all of them, there's no video component. So I think there are other considerations too. Like if you're mixing in surround for a live show, like is it weird when you see a player playing like a solo on the screen in front of you and then it comes out of one of the rear speakers? Right. Like I could see how that might bother some people. So that could be another explanation why some live album mixes tend to be more conservative. I mean, personally, like I don't really care. Like if that example was, for me, like if somebody was playing a sax solo and it came out of my rear speaker, I would think like, oh, that's cool. Right. Yeah. Yeah. There is
something cinematically interesting that happens in this film, where in the first song is just David Byrne. He comes out and he sings Psycho Killer, and he's got a little tape machine playing. It's probably being piped in from the front of house or whatever. But, he sits down a tape machine and says, I got a tape to play for you. And it's got this little beat that goes, and he sings and plays. So at first, it's very much just upfront and ambience. But as the band starts to fill in behind him, slowly the back speakers begin to fill out. As it ends up being like a 9-piece band or something like that, when you have the 2 keyboard players, bass drummer, and the backing singers too, who are really a part of the sonic tapestry as well as the visual aspect. This is a really, really cool album. And when you're talking about the audio only component being adventurous, I'm actually kind of curious to hear that, and I wish that it had been included in this package somehow. But what else can I say about this other than it's an antidepressant in celluloid form. Every time I watch this, it gives me a big lift, and I absolutely love it.
When David Byrne walks out with that like boxy suit, always fun.
Makes me laugh every time.
And like you were saying, it's not just a concert; like it's a cinematic film. Like there's a stylized component to it. Like it's not like you're just watching a video that was shot. So yeah, I mean it's iconic. Definitely recommended.
Yeah, Jonathan Demme who would go on to make The Silence of the Lambs, made this film. So that's diversity.
I'll say. All right, so my next choice is going to be another Elliott Shiner mix, which is Loggins and Messina sitting in again at the Santa Barbara Bowl, which again was recorded, I think, in the early 2000s, like 2004, 2005. One thing that's cool about this is, so Loggins and Messina had a couple albums that were released in quad in the 70s. Their self-titled album, which is the one that has like Angry Eyes and Your Mama Don't Dance, Full Sail and Native Sons. Mm-hmm. But the album that made them famous, Sittin' In, it has like Danny's Song. That album was never released in surround. So this will be a common theme in a lot of our picks, but there's examples of songs where the studio version does not exist in any kind of multi-channel. And for these live versions are the first opportunity to hear those songs in surround. But I mean, my comments on this are relatively similar to the Eagles one. Again, like it's an extremely separated mix. Like the whole back line is in the rear speakers. In the song Angry Eyes, there's an extended sax solo that's totally behind you. A lot of percussion in the rears, backing vocals. And I would say, like, if the only thing you know about Kenny Loggins is like, a lot of the stuff he did in the 80s, like Footloose, Danger Zone. This music is definitely a little bit sort of looser than that. Like it's not that kind of thing. Both their voices are really good on this. Like they were both singing really well. And yeah, I mean, this is long out of print, but I think it's not terribly difficult to find a used copy. I don't think I paid that much for mine a couple years ago, but yeah, really cool release.
If I may make an observation about Elliott Shiner in the, I've only heard a couple of his albums that he just a very little bit of his work, but it seems like he stands out in terms of like the mid 2000s era because, and this will lead in, I guess, to my next choice, but a lot of multi-channel albums from the mid 2000s suffered from the loudness war. And I don't really hear that. I don't really hear that in his mixes.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, he did a lot of multi-channel mixes. Like there's, dozens of releases, studio and live stuff. I don't know if all of them are totally free of it, but like the standout examples for me, like the Steely Dan stuff, like Gaucho or the Nightfly, the Doobie Brothers, the Captain and Me, like those are all, the mastering of those is great. They sound awesome, good dynamic range. And I would say the same for these live releases, the Eagles and Loggins and Messina ones both sound great. So yeah.
Yeah. A Night at the Opera. That's one of my favorites that he did.
Yes. Yeah.
That one's sick. We were talking about mid 2000s 5.1 mixes and how sometimes they could be quite loud and compressed. And usually that's kind of a dirty word when you talk about compression, but I wanted to highlight this one, David Bowie's Stage, because despite the fact that it has some inherent flaws, it's actually quite an enjoyable mix, I find. And it's sort of like what you were saying, where the Berlin trilogy albums, the Low, Heroes, Lodger, that's my favorite of David Bowie's works. And those albums don't exist in multi-channel, and they should. Like yes. Currently, this is really the only way to hear those songs, like Heroes, like is one of the most famous songs ever written. And that's the only way to hear it. So you and I were both just kind of talking about this beforehand, but I think Tony Visconti was a little bit ahead of the curve here because he says in the liner notes that he's not a fan of the kind of mixes where, again, like it's just the band up front and venue ambience in the back. And it's so exciting to hear Speed of Life, which is the opening track from Low. And you can hear like the synthesizer shooting and it sounds almost like it's going left, center, right. And maybe it's trailing in the back a little bit, but it's so exciting to hear that. It's exciting to hear the ambient tracks where David's like playing the Chamberlin, which is a kind of mellotron instrument. But the rock songs are really, in your face and aggressive, which I enjoy. It's maybe got some kind of EQ or harshness that I'm not a fan of. But overall, it's very enjoyable. So what did you think about this when you revisited it?
Yeah, it's quite rare. It's on one of those DVD audio discs, as you can see in the picture. And there was also a similar release of the David Live album.
Yes.
Which was not recorded by or mixed by Tony Visconti, I don't think. He didn't do the surround mix on the DVD-A. But I agree. It's cool how in the booklet there's quite a sort of extensive foreword where he talks about, the process of recording the album. It was recorded at Madison Square Garden. And he claims that it's totally live as it happened that night. There's maybe one section where they edited in a performance from a different night, but
Providence, Rhode Island, part of Station to Station, I want to say, from Providence.
But like you said, the best thing about it, aside from the fact that it is a very adventurous mix, partially because there's no video to contend with, like I was saying before, is that there's all these songs where the studio versions don't exist in surround, all the Berlin stuff. For Station to Station, there is a surround mix of the studio version, but I don't think it's very good. Maybe people have different opinions about that. So it's nice to hear those songs, in a more involving surround version. It's interesting, if you look at, there are quite a few Bowie albums that have been mixed in surrounds, but it's it's an interesting selection. You'd think some of the ones that would be go-tos, Let's Dance, there's no surround version of that, but there is one of Heathen, which is this one of his later, post 2000 albums. That one was probably done because it was new at the time when 5.1 was the thing. But supposedly, and I don't know where this comes from, but it's been repeated online, that supposedly Bowie's edict when it came to reissuing these records, or remixing them, was that only the original producers who worked on the record would be the ones allowed to remix them.
Right.
So it's sort of, you end up having this inconsistency across the surround releases where there's, ones like Tony Visconti, as you could tell from this release, is someone who's sort of very interested in surround sound, and his mixes tend to be sort of more involving and experimental. And then there's other ones like Station to Station where there's just reverb in the back.
This is another album where there's been several releases of it over the years. And for instance, the very first one was presented in a very unconventional way, where the tracks weren't presented in concert order. They were actually presented in chronological order. And that was David Bowie's something that he totally gave his blessing. He loved the idea. But the fans didn't, and understandably so, because of course completely destroyed the flow of the concert. So you could buy the original version, which was in a completely different track order. And then I think it came out, I'm sure there were other releases, but there was a CD release around the time, which was brick walled. It had some compression issues and it was kind of harsh, but it restored the running order. And I think it actually added some bonus tracks. And then there was one that came out in about 2015 or so, which plugged in some tracks from another source. So we got the complete show, and it's very harsh sounding to me. And I would argue that this 5.1 mix, for all of its flaws, is the best way to hear the album. And one of the most exciting parts of the concert is the second half when we get the Ziggy Stardust material, because Bowie's in fine vocal form, and the band's kicking. And again, we can compare it because there's an Atmos mix of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars from Ken Scott. So
there's a 5.1 mix too.
And there's a 5.1 mix too, which I haven't heard. But the Ken Scott Atmos mix is pretty good. So yeah, this is a wonderful concert, and some of my favorite versions of these songs. So I'm glad you had the opportunity to revisit it, because even though it is hard to find, I paid like $60 for it, which is a lot of money. But I was glad to have it because this is my favorite Bowie material. And if you can find it, I recommend it. And hopefully, because there is footage from this tour, I don't know if it's the same performance or not, but you can see it in the Moon Age Daydream documentary. And I keep hoping that since we got the 4K of the 4K transfer of Ziggy Stardust movie, I keep hoping maybe we might get a release of this that's video and audio with like a new Atmos mix. So that would be cool.
For sure. Cool. And the last thing I'll add is that it was long rumored that there was going to be a quad release of this album in the 70s, because it came out, I think, 75, right?
No. This is like after quad. This would have been 1979.
It was like the late 70s, but it was rumored that there would be a quad version. And none of Bowie's albums that were released during the period where quad was a thing were released in that format for whatever reason. Like, I'm surprised, a record like Young Americans, which was on, RCA, one of the biggest quad sporting labels, there was never a, quad LP or tape version of that album. But Tony Visconti mentions in the liner notes that he did put up like extra mics with the intention to do a quad mix. Like, he was just sort of covering all his bases. And he was finally able to use those ambient mics in mixing the albums for surround decades later. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah. Cool, man. And this is one that I have. I watched it a couple days ago. So yeah, let's talk some Wilson.
Yeah, so this is Steven Wilson, Home Invasion, live at the Royal Albert Hall. So this was recorded in the summer of 2018, and it was released, I think, on Blu-ray like a year later, 2019.
And then 4K. It has a 4K UHD release too.
Yeah, that like just came out, I think, this year. Yep. But so this was recorded during the To the Bone tour, which was actually his last solo tour until this year, which is kind of crazy. It was, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago?
Yeah, but the pandemic happened within like a year of this. So
I would say a lot of people may disagree, but my personal favorite Steven Wilson solo album, and the one I go back to the most, is To the Bone.
Okay.
So I'm a big fan of this period. This thing is shot immaculately well. Like, the video part is stunning. And since I'm a fan of To the Bone, I love the track list on this. I think they do pretty much the whole record.
I think so. I think, ironically, the title track is absent. They start with Nowhere Now, the second song. But other than that, I think they do the whole thing.
And like, I would say the live versions to me are the definitive versions of those songs.
Yeah, sure.
For sure. I mean, Ninette Tayeb was there with them for the show. So she does, Pariah live, which is incredible.
Yep.
One song I thought was like markedly improved in the live show, which isn't one of my favorites on the record, is there's this piece called Song of I. It's kind of like this sort of interesting trip hop song. And there's this crazy like Ebo solo in the live version. That's really cool. So yeah, I really like the track list on this one. And there's also a lot of, older songs from past albums and some Porcupine Tree stuff. Like, I know the Raven That Refused to Sing is on here. And that's, of course, like the perfect closing song for a concert. I think it's the last encore. There's a sort of solo version of Even Less, where it's just Steven playing acoustic, electric, which is really cool. And the surround mix is kind of similar to the Made in Japan one, like we were talking about, where it's kind of the core band in the front, the drums, bass, vocal, and then the lead and rhythm guitars are mixed further out into the room, but not totally detached from the front. So usually it's like Steven playing rhythm, I think, on the left side, and then Alex Hutchings, who is the touring guitarist, playing solos, I think, on the right side. And it might be reversed on some of the songs. I don't remember for sure. And then there's things like, Adam Holzman's keyboards are usually in the back. Some of the vocal harmonies are in the back. And there's also some pre-recorded elements, flown in from the studio versions, which also tend to be in the back speakers. So I would say of the various Steven live concert discs, and there's a bunch of them, there's Get All You Deserve, Anesthetize, Arriving Somewhere But Not Here. For me, this is the one I tend to go back to the most.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been a Steven Wilson fan for a couple of years now, and first time I saw him was on the Raven That Refused to Sing tour. So I've been waiting for a release of that. The closest that we get is the Drive Home EP, which is awesome. I almost considered including it because it was recorded, I think, a month before I saw him. So it's like the same band, same arrangements, same stage show. And I could basically just pretend it was recorded in Pittsburgh when I watch it, because it's so, so realistic. But back to this one. One thing that I wanted to point out is that I like that Ninette is taking the lead on a couple of songs. Like, she rocks the house on People Who Eat Darkness.
Oh yeah, I like it better. I like it better than the studio cut.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that's really cool. And I also think it's interesting that he was beginning to mix in some Porcupine Tree songs at this point, because when I saw him on the Raven tour, he was only doing, he was alternating Radioactive Toy, I think, with something else. So I don't think I got any Porcupine Tree stuff when I saw him. And then 2 years later, I saw him on Hand Cannot Erase, and he did Sleep Together, which is one of my favorite Porcupine Tree tracks. But it's interesting.
They do it on this too.
They do it on this too, which is really exciting. But then you also get Arriving Somewhere But Not Here, which is kind of like a set piece track of the Porcupine Tree era. And you can kind of feel that Wilson was starting to look back a little bit. And it's interesting because I think the next canonical release is Closure Continuation, right? Future
Bites, then Closure Continuation.
Oh yeah, right. But I mean, like, in terms of like live releases, the next thing is Closure Continuation.
We know now in retrospect that this whole time in secret they were working on Closure / Continuation. Like some of those songs, like, Chimera's Wreck or Harridan, were written, I think, in like 2012 or 2013. So a lot of those songs were kind of, lurking in the background for a long time. But I agree with you. That is interesting. And then another point I'll add, you mentioned, like, there's Ninette taking the whole vocal on People Who Eat Darkness. There's also a couple of songs from the Soundcheck that are mixed in surround as the bonus tracks.
Yes.
And one of the songs they do is Routine, which is one of my favorite tracks on Hand Cannot Erase. And it's Ninette singing the whole thing. And it's performed to just like the empty Royal Albert Hall, and it's super haunting and cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a perfect setting, I think, for that song, because I remember seeing that on the Hand Cannot Erase tour, and you don't necessarily know what that song's about if you just listen to it, but then you get the visuals and stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, I know what's going on. But I thought this would be a good. I kind of want to talk about these two Porcupine Tree releases together, because we were kind of hinting at Closure Continuation, and actually my favorite is Anesthetize, which we'll talk about in just a second. If you don't mind, I think I might batch these together. But what I noticed is that when Porcupine Tree came back, like, there's always that fear that they're not going to be as good as they used to be. And this is a very special release for me, because this is the first album that I ever heard in Dolby Atmos. This was like, I just set up all my speakers. I put the calibration mic in the center and got everything set up, and I threw this disc in, and this was my first Atmos experience. I remember just being totally blown away by what I was hearing. And I do think that they sound better than ever here, even though, of course, they've got a different bass player. I think Randy McStein is here, right? This is where he enters, and he's just astonishing guitarist and perfect foil for Steven's music. But they do end up doing a lot of stuff from the Fear of a Blank Planet record. And I almost feel like it's got a little bit more of a punky energy on this new set. And I don't know why. Whereas the Anesthetize set's more psychedelic. But I'm going to go ahead and put up Anesthetize as well, because this is my favorite.
I'll add before you move on from Closure / Continuation is, like, I like you were saying with Drive Home, where it's like you listen to it and you pretend like it was when you saw them. I feel the same way about this one. I saw them at Radio City in September of 22.
Nice.
So whenever I listen to this, I always sort of think back to actually being there. So I did see this show. They played to a huge crowd for this album. It was recorded in Amsterdam. I think they had said at the time it was one of the biggest audiences they ever played to. Like, it was more than 10,000 people. So it sort of shows you how much their profile had grown in the years since, albums like Anesthetize or Arriving Somewhere But Not Here. And then the only other thing before we move on is this was the first time that Steven mixed a live concert in Atmos.
Oh, really?
So when I listened to it, I was wondering, like, because I had an idea of how he did them in 5/1 from listening to, things like Anesthetize or Arriving Somewhere, Get All You Deserve. But I was wondering when it came out, like, what's he going to put in the height speakers? Like, what do you put in the height speakers for a live show? And when I interviewed him after this came out, I asked him that question. I was like, how did you approach this? And he said that the idea was not to make it like you were there, but to make it like, what would they do if they had a spatial audio PA at the show?
Interesting.
So, like, what would you want to come out of the heights while the actual show was going on? So in a lot of cases, the heights are Richard Barbieri's, crazy synth parts.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the song Harridan, one of his solos comes entirely from the height speakers. And there's also a lot of, I wouldn't say there's a lot of them, but there are a few moments where like there's pre-recorded things that are thrown in from the studio cuts, like Last Chance to Evacuate Planet Earth, like the Heaven's Gate guy's monologue comes out of the height speakers. So I would say it probably is the most adventurous Atmos mix of a live show I've heard so far. And it's, brilliantly recorded, sounds as good as any studio album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can hear a big difference because I think Anesthetize sounds great.
It does. Absolutely.
I think Closure Continuation sounds even better. And I'll be honest, like, I didn't grab this. This was like my white whale. This was my holy grail for a long time, because when this came out, I wanted it so much. And I was in high school, and I remember seeing the price tag on the Blu-ray was like $26, $27. I'm like, geez, that's a lot of money for somebody who doesn't have an income. And so I didn't get it. And then of course it fell out of print, and then I couldn't get it at all. And it was reissued on DVD. And I was like, oh, geez, I always wanted the Blu-ray. Well, I finally broke down in the past week and just bought the Blu-ray bought the DVD. And I'm glad I did. It was $20 well spent, because this is personally my favorite. During the pandemic years, I became obsessed with the title track from this, Anesthetize. And I would just watch it again and again and again and again. And this is, of course, before Porcupine Tree came back. Because I remember looking at their set list and saying, oh, they played Anesthetize, I want to see that so bad. But this does a good job, again, of placing you within a 3-dimensional space of the live show. Like, it's not realistic, like you would say, like, you do get the audience noise in the back and stuff, but it feels like you're immersed in the music. And I don't remember exactly when he did this, but just going back and because I know this is like an early 5.1 mix for him.
It's like 2008.
Yeah, right.
2007, something like that.
Yeah, and Arriving Somewhere Not Here was before this, of course.
That's like 2005.
Yeah,
that was done really early. Yeah,
very, very early. But I think that this is actually a very good indication of where he was going to go in the future. And it's an awesome performance. You get all of the album as the first part of it, and then you get a good bit of the nil reoccurring EP as well. And I absolutely love the song Normal, as it connects back conceptually to Sentimental. It's got the same chorus, and I believe I read it was written first, and Sentimental came out of it. But I like it as a recurring theme. When you listen to the Hulk show, it's like, oh, that's cool. It's like a callback to an earlier song in the set. But yeah, this is my favorite of the maybe of Wilson's maybe period, like his studio or his solo stuff. And it's a great heavy album. It's a good way to introduce people to Steven's world, I feel.
Yeah,
I highly recommend it.
If I want to listen to Fear of a Blank Planet, usually I'll pick this over the studio record. The studio record's great, but I think for me, this is my go-to. And there's a couple of songs on it from older records that are not in surround. Like, I think they do Dark Matter at the show, so that's cool. Another thing that's interesting that we didn't touch on, and this applies to Home Invasion as well, is that one of the things that's sort of a trademark of Steven Wilson's surround mix is that he usually puts the vocals in the center channel, right? But on the live records, usually there's not much in the center. I think on Home Invasion, there's nothing at all in the center speaker. So it's interesting that the approach is a little bit different. I don't remember offhand if Anesthetize was like that or not. I know Closure/Continuation Live does have the center vocals like a studio record.
It certainly felt that way. when I was watching a bit of it last night. It felt like the vocals were very centered. But yeah, do we want to move on to your next pick?
Sure.
Which is,
well, fittingly, it is another Steven Wilson mix.
It is. So famously, Wilson, who I think likes to be a contrarian at times, says that he prefers the 80s Genesis records. And he's said multiple times he's not that interested in the Peter Gabriel era, or the Steve Hackett era. So if you want to hear Wilson mix some vintage Genesis, this is the closest you're going to get.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I remember I was surprised at the time that he agreed to do this, and I think it was probably because he had remixed a couple of Steve Hackett's solo records. He did.
Which ones?
Please Don't Touch and Spectral Mornings.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, they were released on as part of a box set sometime in the early 2010s. I want to say like 2013, 2014, something like that. So that was kind of my only exposure to Steve Hackett solo stuff. I really like the surround version of the Spectral Mornings album. I think there's some great songs on that. And for me, like, I got into Genesis like kind of the reverse way. Like my dad's Genesis, like the albums he liked were like Invisible Touch. And so I heard that stuff first, and I thought like that's what Genesis was. And then I went back and discovered the earlier albums later. And I would say I'm still like a pretty casual fan of that stuff, but my favorite of the Gabriel records is definitely Selling England by the Pound. So This is a no-brainer for me when they announced this is coming out. So, Steve Hackett has been on the road, doing these Genesis revisited shows for years now, and there's a bunch of
25 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they did one like for Foxtrot recently. Maybe have they done one for the Lamb yet?
Yes, the Lamb sits down. Or the Lamb stands up, I think is what it's called. Yeah, it's just come out.
But I would say if you're going to pick one to get, this would be the one, because Steven Wilson did the surround mix for it. And the first half of the show is all solo stuff. So they do like the song like Every Day from Spectral Mornings is the opener. Craig Blundell, who was the drummer in Steven Wilson's studio band, live and studio band, he plays on Home Invasion and on the tour that's going on now. He's the drummer. Yeah. He plays on this.
I first saw him on Hand Cannot Erase.
Yeah. So I think he's been playing with Steven for a while, but he plays in the Steve Hackett band on this. And then
he was with Hackett first, right?
I think so. Yeah. And then for the second half of the show, they play the entire Selling England by the Pound from start to finish. And one of the coolest things about this concert is the vocalist, Nad Sylvan, who I wouldn't say he's doing like a Peter Gabriel impression, but his voice is sort of akin to 70s Peter Gabriel.
The timbre is, yeah.
Yeah. And I think he does a really good job. The fans of that stuff are really picky about that sort of thing. And I think most people are really happy with the job he's been doing in this band. And the surround mix is, again, kind of like the other Steven Wilson 5-1 mixes we talked about. There are some distinct elements in the back. There's a couple of songs with like a soprano sax that's mixed totally to the rear. Some of the guitars are pushed further out into the room. This one does have the center channel isolated vocals. And the last thing I'll say about it is for the encore, they do a couple of songs from the Trick of the Tail record. Like they do Dance on a Volcano and Los Endos. And, as you know, that was the first record where Phil Collins was the singer. Mm-hmm. But in this version, since Nad Sylvan's voice is sort of like Peter Gabriel, it's kind of like this weird what if alternate reality where what if Peter Gabriel was the singer on those songs? And it's an interesting, different way to hear them.
Yeah, this is an interesting set. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with it, but what I noticed was that the arrangements are very different. Like there's no soprano sax in OG Genesis. So it's kind of cool to hear those woodwind elements. Because is John Hackett in the band here?
I don't think so.
Special guests for this performance were Steve's brother, John Hackett, flute.
Oh, nice.
And Amanda Lehman. So yeah, he's playing flute. But, okay, Rob Townsend is playing the saxes. Okay. Cool.
I mean, full disclosure, like I haven't watched the video in a while. Like this is one of the ones where I just I rip the audio to FLACS, and that's usually the version that I listen to. What else can we say about this one? The other thing I was going to mention was that you mentioned like arrangement differences. The song "I Know What I Like it turns into like a jam on this version where they all take solos, which I thought was really cool.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think this is still in print. I mean, it came out, I think, like either right before or during the pandemic. And the performance was from either 2018 or 19.
So it's contemporary to the Home Invasion concert.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. That's cool. That's a cool choice. I'd like to explore this a little bit more. I think, well, since we were talking Genesis.
Perfect segue.
Yeah. Let's talk about Three Sides Live. So, again, much like the Stage album, I don't think this is a perfect mix. It tends to be very front heavy. A lot of what's in the background is Tony Banks' keyboards. And that can be really exciting for songs like The Fountain of Salmacis, which is included as an extra. And the thing to know about this is that it was a live album. Released in 1983 or 82, because it's after Abacab. It's the Abacab tour, and what they did is they've got a video, and it was an 80s video where you might have excerpts of songs, and then you'd have interspersed documentary or interview footage, and that stuff's really fun to watch. You get to see how pleasant and funny Phil Collins was, for instance. Like, he's just effortlessly funny in some of these interviews, and it's very entertaining to watch. And you get to see their families who are on tour with them, which is kind of nice. You get to see them hanging with their kids and stuff in the tour bus. But there's some criminal stuff here. Like, they throw in, I think, an interview segment right in the middle of the segue from Behind the Lines into Duchess, which should be illegal.
I hate when they do that on these things. There's there's a Steely Dan live set that Elliot Shiner did the mix for that came out in the early 2000s. They do the same thing. Like, there are these interview segments interspersed in the songs. It's really annoying.
Yeah. But that segue from Duchess, from Behind the Lines into Duchess is like an, oh my God moment. And they totally spoil it. But as a compromise, you get a number of songs included on the extras as just an audio only bonus. So you get the complete Behind the Lines into Duchess on the extras. And oftentimes when I want to enjoy this material, I just play the bonus selection because it's just an hour of uninterrupted Genesis. And it starts off in the Duke and Abacab period, but it slowly starts to look backwards into the prog era. Also, during the video segment, you get a fantastic version of the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway medley of like In the Cage and the Slippermen, which is awesome. I love watching that stuff. And it kind of highlights the fact that this trio version of Genesis that a lot of prog fans think is like sacrilegious. And, hilariously, if you listen to the beginning of Man on the Corner, somebody says, "Where's the rest of the band? Where's Peter Gabriel?" So like they were getting the hecklers even back then. But I think what this proves is that the Mike Rutherford, Phil Collins, Tony Banks nucleus of the band was always kind of there, going all the way back to like Nursery Crime. That was always kind of the meat of this band. But I find this a very enjoyable concert, even though Nick Davis's mixes are not my thing. I just got the early 70s Genesis box, and I'm rather disappointed.
The green box, right?
The green box, the early 70s one. Yeah. I'm rather disappointed in it, but this is better. You do feel like when the dynamics start to really come to a pitch that it is a little bit, brick-walled a touch. But overall, I think that Nick Davis's approach suits this era of the band better than the early 70s. Do you have any thoughts on this? Have you seen it or heard it?
I have not heard this one. My first thought was I was surprised you picked this over Seconds Out.
I don't have it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't have Seconds Out. No.
Seconds Out, I do have the Nick Davis surround version. And like you mentioned, like all the Genesis stuff, it is plagued by sort of brick walling and harshness. But I think Cody talked about it when we did the sort of our favorite surround albums, and it is a fairly adventurous mix for a live album. You know, it's not like a Steven Wilson or Elliot Shiner mix where there's things totally mixed behind you, but it is more immersive than just listening to the stereo version.
Mm-hmm. That's the case for this, and I think in some ways I might actually prefer engaging with this material this way over the album version. Although the album version's got a lot more stuff in it. Bill Bruford shows up at one point. Steve Hackett's on the album version because there's different eras that are kind of thrown in. And then of course, famously, there's two variants of this. There's one that has a fourth side that's a studio side that's outtakes from like Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering, and then there were three, and I think Duke maybe. Yeah, I think there's like a studio side version, and then there was another version that has a fourth live side, and a lot of the material that's on that fourth live side is older, so that's interesting to hear too. But we do get one of my all-time favorite Genesis tunes, which is One for the Vine. We get an excellent live version of that here, and the spatial placement is very good on that. So I'm a big fan of this, and it's another one of those releases that is available as a standalone, although I think it just recently fell out of print. You used to be able to get it for like $15 on Amazon, and I told everybody to get it because it's worth it. It's worth it for $15. And it's the footage is really well cleaned up. Like it's 16 millimeter, but it looks like it could be a 4K transfer. I'm not sure, but it looks very strong and it sounds great. So yeah, I do recommend it.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out. I appreciate the recommendation.
Sure thing.
Okay, so my next pick is going to be the Pineapple Thief's Nothing But the Truth. And this one is kind of cheating a little bit because it's not exactly live. It's like live in the studio. So this was recorded during the pandemic. It was done as like one of those live streams, you know, like every band was doing this during the pandemic where they would live stream a concert because no one could tour. Mm-hmm. And it was recorded like in a rehearsal space of some kinds. And the Blu-ray came out a year later, so it came out in 2021. And we also have it on IAA as a download, the audio-only version. But it was filmed like, because it's not a traditional live concert, there's no audience. They sort of played around with how the band members are placed. So typically when you go to see a show, you know, it's like the band is on stage and like the singer is in the middle and the drummer's either behind them or off to one side. Like everybody is kind of on the same, they're all facing the same way. The way they did this is that Bruce Sword, the singer, is like in the middle of the room with a camera on a track going around him. And then Gavin Harrison playing drums is in the front. The second guitar player is behind him. And then keyboards are on one side and the bassist, who also sings harmonies, on the other side. So it's like the singer in the middle with the rest of the band facing him, spread out around him in a circle. And when he mixed it in surround, and this was Bruce Sword's first Atmos mix, he had only done 5.1 up to this point, he just placed everybody the way they are in the video. So if you listen to it there's a dedicated 5.1 mix and an Atmos mix. His vocal is in the middle, like filling up all the speakers. Like it sounds like it's in the middle of your head. And then the drums are in front, guitar behind you, harmonies on one side, keyboards on the other. And there's also like some assorted, you know, bits flown in from the studio recordings. A couple of the songs have like this like electronic percussion that's usually in the height speakers. And since it's not like a truly live recording, it was cut like in a dead rehearsal space. The sonics are immaculate. You know, it's better recorded than your typical live album. Though, you know, live albums have come a long way. Like we were talking about, Closure/Continuation Live sounds as good as any studio record I've heard. And the other neat thing about this one is that most of the Pineapple Thief's albums are recorded, you know, each of the guys in the band as a home studio, and they kind of cut all the parts in isolation and combine them together. At least that's my understanding. So in this case, it's kind of interesting to see how they play off each other. And they had played a couple songs on this that were not performed live yet at the time. Like just about everything from the Versions of the Truth album, because that record came out during the pandemic in 2020. And they ended up going on tour. I think they've gone on several tours since this came out in 2021. But they have a couple of live Blu-rays out there. There's another one called Where We Stood that was recorded a few years earlier at like a regular concert hall. But I would say if I had to choose one, this would be the one that I'd go with.
I'm not familiar with this band. Like, this is a total blind spot for me. It's interesting how the like two of the biggest multi-channel mixers are both from bands that have PT, PT bands, and Gavin Harrison.
Yeah.
Of them. Yeah. How does that happen? I was reading on the Quad forums not too long ago that Bruce Sword does very different 5.1 mixes versus his Atmos mixes. And I think the only real, well, I have Curious Ruminant, but I also have the Christmas album, the Jethro Tull Christmas album. I'll be honest with you, the thing that's like preventing me from getting more into Sword's work is that I love Jethro Tull, but he's not mixed any of like my favorite Jethro Tull records yet.
Yeah.
Curious Ruminant it's good for what it is. The Christmas album is maybe my least favorite Jethro Tull album. However, he is probably going to do Under Wraps, which is an album that I defend personally. So I'm looking forward to giving his work its due chance, because I've heard a little bit of I've heard samples of some of his solo works in Atmos, and I think he's got a great voice. I love the atmosphere of his music. So I might be interested in checking this out. I like the whole idea that, because during the pandemic, a lot of people were doing those, like, everybody makes their parts in their bedrooms albums. And it's interesting that Pineapple Thief did the opposite. They got together and they made a live album, and, you have the spirit of togetherness minus an audience.
I would say, like, for someone like you who's not familiar with the band, I think I'd say there's certainly like a Radiohead influence, definitely in Bruce Sword's
I like
vocals.
Radiohead.
And if you're a fan of like early 2000s Porcupine Tree, so like the pre-In Absentia albums like Stupid Dream and Lightbulb Sun that are a little less metallic, I would say it kind of draws from that as an influence. And, they do all the usual prog things like playing, parts in weird time signatures, and there's 10-minute songs. And I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah, I would probably enjoy it. This is the pandemic album before the pandemic. And I think this is a perfect segue from that. Because here you have Pink Floyd playing at an empty Coliseum in Pompeii. And, there's always been a little bit of controversy. Is this actually a live album or not? And it's gotten to the point where they've actually removed the live from the title, because for 40 or 50 years it was known as Live at Pompeii. But it's like, is it really a live album if there's no audience? Then there's studio stuff mixed in. But to be honest with you, I don't really care, because it's the band performing together, whether they're doing it in the studio or they're doing it with an audience, without an audience. It doesn't really, matter to me. But what's most interesting to me about this as an Atmos mix and also 5.1 mix is that it is a very sparse one. It's sort of like Made in Japan, where they really only had, I think Steven said, one mono track for each band member, including Nick Mason's drums.
So I think there's even less on this than there is on Made in Japan.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just very, very, very sparse. But what I suspect is that you do get some ambience mics, because part of this experience is hearing it bouncing off of those the stone seating. And I couldn't believe it when he said that Nick Mason was a mono track, because when he's doing those tom runs in One of These Days, I swear they were dancing in the height speakers. And I don't know if that's some sort of trick with the ambient mics or how he was able to pull that off. But ultimately, like, I've been a Pink Floyd fan for years, and this is like the first time I've been able to hear Roger's bass, so prominently. And this is the best it's ever sounded to me. And it's quickly risen to become my favorite Pink Floyd release, period. So I really appreciate this. And I also like the idea that You can split between the Atmos mix or the 5.1, depending on which version of the album you're wanting to listen to. And you can choose to listen to this album either with the interview footage that was from like a year or two later when they were making Dark Side, or without. You can just appreciate it as a Pink Floyd live album in surround sound. But a wonderful release, unexpected. It looks great. It sounds great. What more can I say?
It's on a very inexpensive standalone edition too, so that's another plus.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes at like a very cool point in the career of Pink Floyd, because it's sort of the transition between the earlier kind of psychedelic stuff and right before they were going to do Dark Side and Wish You Were Here, their most famous period.
Right.
So it's sort of like the link between the early years and the middle years. And this is not the first time that this was mixed in surround. There was a quad mix that was done in the 70s, which it would have been nice if they included that in this reissue. But there is a quad mix, and there was also a different 5.1 mix by Andy Jackson that was included in the early years box set.
Okay.
That was released, I think, in 2016. Mm-hmm. But I agree, the Steven mix is definitely the best it has ever sounded. I think this version of Echoes is the definitive version.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, the studio cut's great, but yeah.
Yeah.
And another cool thing about it is you mentioned the footage from Abbey Road when they were recording Dark Side. And it's sort of a tease to hear Steven mix a couple of the little bits from Dark Side, like the On the Run, like the sequencer moving around. I mean, I don't know if that will ever happen, if there'll be a Steven Atmos mix of Dark Side. My guess is probably not, but it's kind of cool to hear him sort of getting to play with some of the elements from those sessions.
Yeah, it's like me playing with a Passion Play or The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. Like that's Steven Wilson's favorite album of all time, right? Mm-hmm. So it's cool to see him play with that. And I felt like he must have been looking at the picture when he was doing that mix, because it seems like the placement of some of Roger's synths are matching what he's doing on the dial, or maybe that's just a psychological thing. I don't know. It's like a placebo effect, but as he's twisting the knob, it feels like he's actually playing with it in the room. And I love little subtle moments like that.
Yeah, and I would say the Atmos mix is pretty similar in approach to the Made in Japan one. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the drums and bass and vocal in the front. And then Gilmour's guitar is mostly in the left side speaker, and Rick Wright's, organ or keys are mostly in the right side speaker, but not totally pulled out of the front.
And you get overdubs in the back, like the studio when they did the backing vocals on Echoes.
Yeah, so that's
coming full force in the back.
So both the vocals are double tracked. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like they're panned diagonally. So Gilmour's voice is in, I think, like left front and right rear, and then Rick Wright's voice is in right front and left rear. So they're sort of crossing through you. It's a cool effect when you listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could listen to this on loop. I absolutely love this material. And just the fact that it sounds better than ever.
I hope it's not the final word on Steven mixing
Certainly
stuff
not.
From Floyd. Yeah.
I think, I don't know if the multi-tracks exist, but Obscured by Clouds. I think that would be a good choice for him.
Well, they say that Andy Jackson mixed it in 5.1 for the early year set, but it ended up getting removed from the set for certain reasons. I think his stereo remix was included on the early years edition. So all that is to say, I think the multi-tracks do exist for Obscured by Clouds.
Right, yeah. And I think there was like a secret remix of Metal or something like that.
And there's a quad mix just of Echoes, like just one song. I guess it was done like as some kind of like test or something.
Yeah.
They just mixed the one track and they ended up not doing the rest of the record. But that's pretty cool too, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more the Pink Floyd, their archival material, I don't think has ever been particularly well presented. So I hope this is a new era in the Sony acquisition of the catalog. I hope it's a new era.
Well, everybody mocks like the marbles and the Aversion sets, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember what came out recently where it's the Blues for Allah. The Grateful Dead, where they actually just released the component parts of the box set as individuals. Like you can get the vinyl, you can get the Atmos Blu-ray, and they released the marbles as their own. You can just get the swag on its own.
I'm glad that is something that has stopped, including marbles in the box sets.
Yeah, sure. All right, so what are we gonna do? Oh, excellent segue. I swear I didn't plan this.
So my next pick is going to be Grateful Dead Europe 72. So sadly, I believe this is the only release on either of our lists where there is no physical release. There's just the Atmos mixes on streaming services. And it was released kind of very quietly to the streaming services. It just sort of popped up on Apple Music one day in 2022. I think it was done for the 50th anniversary. There were a bunch of reissues done for this record. At the time, there was like a new vinyl edition, remastered CD, but I don't know, for whatever reason, they didn't do an Atmos Blu-ray. So maybe with Blues for Allah coming out, they'll eventually go back and redo this one.
Hope so.
So this was it was a triple album, sort of containing what I guess they deemed kind of the best performances from this long European tour that the Dead were on. And Steven Wilson did the Atmos mix for this. So I think it is well documented that yes, it is a live album, but I think they did a fair bit of like sort of modifying things in the studio. There's some overdubs. I think they recut the vocals on a couple of the songs. If you go online, like there's like a Grateful Dead forum. I could have sworn I found somebody did a post where they listed what all the overdubs are on all the Europe 72 songs, which is kind of cool. But this, I think, was recorded on a 16-track machine, so there's more to work with on this than like on Pompeii or Made in Japan or Bursting Out. The mix basically just has the drums in the front, the vocals usually in the center channel, though some of the backing vocals have a bit of elevation to them, where they're mixed, sort of towards the front height speakers. Usually the two guitars are mixed mostly to the side speakers, but not completely. And then usually whatever the like overdub element is, like it's piano on a couple of songs, I think it's a harmony vocal on some of the other ones, is usually in the front height speakers. So it uses kind of the front area of the Atmos space, like the sides, front height. And then the rear speakers and rear heights in a 714 setup are mostly just the concert ambience. But it is a very sort of discrete, separated out mix. And it's definitely the best this album has ever sounded. I mean, this stuff always, the Dead live records, they made an effort to try to make them like studio albums where most of the audience noise is edited out. Mm-hmm. Like when these songs fade out, you can hear like very faint audience. Like they push that fader down really quickly. But this is a really cool mix, and it's one I hope gets a physical release at some point.
Yeah, I hope so too, because I'll be honest with you, like the only Dead I've heard is Blues for Allah. And I heard it once in the car, just enough to say, hey, I'll buy this. I'll buy the Atmos of this. So, but I think when that comes out, you, me, and Cody Brockway are going to do a discussion on it. So we'll get to talk some Dead soon. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So I would be interested in hearing this, and I might even break my streaming rule to hear it, because that all sounds really fascinating. So was there anything else you wanted to add about Europe 72?
I guess the only other thing is if they put it on a Blu-ray, they'd be able to fit all 3 records worth of material on one disc.
Yeah.
So it'd be the first time you could listen to it contiguously, aside from streaming.
Was this before Made in Japan?
I want to say it was same year. I'm not exactly sure.
72.
72. I'm not sure which came first.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like the liner notes for Made in Japan were like this was, if not the first, it was one of the first like 2-disc multi-disc live albums. So I would be curious if how close this came out to Made in Japan. But I'm sure somebody in the comments will let us know.
Yes, please do.
So we got another, this is a release that has been hinted at and long desired by me, and I'm sure many other Zappa fans. But this is Frank Zappa's Cheaper Than Cheap. And it's a very interesting recording because sort of like what we were talking about with the Pineapple Thief album, this was just done in a TV studio. It was a rehearsal studio that was, I think, owned by Discreet Records, which is where Frank did some of his albums at the time. And very small audience, like maybe 100 people or less. And what's interesting about it is that Frank attempted to make 3 TV specials within the space of a year, and 2 of them didn't work out. And had, until the technology basically caught up to do the audio sync properly to the video. And the first one was the Roxy performances, which came out as Roxy the movie about 10 or 12 years ago. And this one just came out this year and has a really good Atmos mix from Eric Goebel and Karma Auger, who have been remixing the Zappa catalog one album at a time. They've done Waka Jawaka, Graham Wazoo, Overnight Sensation, Apostrophe, and most recently One Size Fits All. But this came out just a couple of months before One Size Fits All, which was amazing. And it's a very fascinating mix. So the thing to know about this is that sound-wise, it's a little bit dead because of the rehearsal studio environment. Like it's a very controlled environment, and it's not the crispest, if that's a word, sounding recording, because, like, for instance, the one thing that always kind of leaves me a little bit flat is the cymbals. The cymbals sound a little bit ill-defined or splashy or something. But I think that with what they had to work with, Eric and Karma did a wonderful job. And it is quite immersive with really good usage, I think, of the front setup. Like the heights, the left and right and the center, I think is well spread out. And, like, you can hear a lot more of Frank's rhythm guitar playing, especially. And he does have another rhythm guitar player. He's got Jeff Simmons. So I don't know how much of it is Frank, how much is Jeff. But I feel like a lot of, like, those details come out. And you do hear the backing speakers used. I mean, obviously you hear the audience, applause coming up through there. But I was hearing, like, Ruth Underwood's percussion floating into the back at times. And I was hearing some of George Duke's keyboard solos, and maybe a guitar solo or something would float in the back or something. But this was a very welcome release. The video, it was shot on video, so it's not like it's HD or anything like that, but it's still fun to watch. And it's fun to see them interact. And I would say overall, it's one of my very favorite Zappa releases to date. So have you watched this? Have you seen it?
Yeah, and I think, like, every Atmos mix that Eric and Karma have done is great.
Mm-hmm.
My current favorite is One Size Fits All, I would say.
So you've revised that since our discussion last time.
Yeah, I think for me that beats out Waka Wazoo. But
me too.
I think it's definitely not as, over the top as the studio records, which you would expect because there's less to work with. But like you were saying, there's certainly, you can hear a lot of the percussion in the back along with the audience. And I think I mentioned this when we were talking about Zappa in the last video I was on, but Karma and Eric have this way of mixing Atmos where they kind of let sounds float out into space, and they're not necessarily tied to a specific speaker or area. And it sort of helps, it's very immersive. It sort of helps you feel like you're more, like, in the space. And it feels very natural. And I think they did a great job on this. And I think we were all surprised that I figured this would be the only Zappa archival release for the year, and they would do One Size next year. But it came out only a few months later, so that was pretty cool.
I think we're going to get Bongo, but we'll see. I think there's a pretty good chance of that. But anyhow, this is a great release. It was one that I hotly anticipated because we got to see a little bit of it on the hologram tour when that came around, the Bizarre World of Frank Zappa. Some of the elements of this were used, but I will say that I think I'm much happier with this mix and presentation over the Roxy film. So I'm all for Eric and Karma doing more live Frank in the near future. Like, for instance, like I think you mentioned in your review of One Size Fits All that there's, of course, an unreleased quad mix of Roxy and Elsewhere.
Well, according to Joe Travers, he's said in interviews and on forums that there is a 4-channel master for that in the vaults.
Yeah.
I guess at some point they decided that it wasn't worth, doing a quad edition of that. Yeah. I mean, they mentioned in the liner notes of One Size Fits All that they started mixing One Size in quad and only finished one song before they decided nobody's really buying quad records. This isn't worth us spending the time. But that would be cool to hear for sure.
We're about to get visited. Hello. Hi, bud. Technical snafu. All right, we will move on to yours. Let's talk about Big Big Train.
Yeah, so this is Big Big Train's Stone and Steel album, which was released in 2016. So this is another kind of live in the studio thing. Mm-hmm. So Big Big Train, if you're not familiar, they've been around, I want to say, since the early 90s. And I would say they're kind of a prog in the vein of early Genesis, like a mix of kind of acoustic folk elements. And David Longdon, who was the singer in this iteration of the band, sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. But he was actually one of the finalists when they were auditioning singers to replace Phil Collins for the last Genesis record. It was between him and a guy named Ray Wilson. And they ended up choosing Ray Wilson for that last album. It's called Calling All Stations.
Yeah.
But he's a great singer. And as you mentioned, Dave Gregory from XTC is also in this iteration of the band.
He's phenomenal in this band.
Yeah. So this recording, it was done at Real World Studios, which is Peter Gabriel's studio in England, which is another Genesis connection. And it was kind of like them running through their tour set list. They were about to go back on tour after, a long time of just doing studio records. So again, the sonics are immaculate because it was cut in a studio. And you see the video footage of them performing in the studio space like it's a concert. If you've seen pictures of Real World Studios, they have like a massive live room.
It looks like the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
And the 5.1 mix was done by a guy named Rob Aubrey, who's the live sound guy for the band. And it's mixed like a studio record. David Longdon's voice is in the center channel. There's basically different instruments in each corner. So like the horns are in the back. A lot of the keyboards are in the back. Guitars typically in the front. There's some great harmony vocals. Most of the people in the band sing. So sometimes there's like the lead vocal in the center and different harmonies from all four corners. For a long time, I considered it the best live surround mix. I think it's been topped by some other things recently, like maybe Closure/Continuation Live is probably my top rated live Atmos mix. But
so it was a good one to start with for me.
This is really cool. And the Blu-ray edition was out of print for a long time and really hard to get. Like people were selling it for over $100 on eBay and Discogs. But for IAA, we were able to make a licensing agreement with the band who owned this recording. So we were able to re-release it as a download with the video. So that came out earlier this year. And if you go on IAA, you can get it. And after this, they released a couple more live Blu-rays that were recorded at concert halls. There's one called Reflectors of Light from 2018. There's another one called Empire that was released, I want to say, 2019, 2020. So those are all really cool. And again, like if you like early or kind of mid-period Genesis, like when they were still kind of proggy, like the Steve Hackett period, I would definitely recommend checking this out.
Yeah, I've heard very little of this stuff. And every time I do, I think, man, I got to set aside some time because this is good stuff. Because I hear like the Trick of the Tail, Wind and Wuthering, and then there were three kind of thing. But I also hear the XTC thing. And XTC are one of my very favorite bands. So it's like kind of that maybe combined with like a little bit of like English Settlement, Mummer era XTC. So yeah, I'm going to have to check this out very, very soon. Because I just heard one of their tracks. I want to say I did a show on Prog Radio and somebody played one of their tracks and I was blown away by it. So I thought it was Mike Keneally playing guitar. I couldn't believe that it was Dave Gregory. So, but yeah, cool choice. I think it's time to talk some Tull. And as I've mentioned before, and anybody who's, I think everybody knows Tull's my favorite band ever since I was a kid. And I have talked about this live mix a lot, and it's maybe, I think it's maybe my favorite multi-channel live mix, just because, again, of the way that it places you within the space of the album. And you had two keyboard players here, and both of them are kind of floating in the back, as well as some of Martin Barr's guitar. And what really impresses me about the placement is that it does feel like you are actually sitting like on stage, or if not on stage, you're sitting like front row center, looking directly at Ian Anderson, because he's right in the middle and just kind of in your face. But I thought it would be more interesting, because I've just, I've talked about this so much. I've waxed poetic about bursting out the inflated edition, but I thought it would be kind of fun to talk about Steven's live mix work with Tull in general, because he's done a number of, they're not really live albums as much as they're just archival live recordings that he's basically brought back from nothing, brought back from the dead. And this isn't necessarily a relevant example, but he just did Carnegie Hall 70, which is the best that's ever sounded by far. But he's also done, well, there's the Madison Square Garden performance that's included on this. And it's,
for me, that's the one I would pick, because it's the most complex recording. I think they said that it was done on 24 track.
Right. Well, there is some 24 track stuff on this, because you're mixing in Bern Switzerland, which of course Jocko Jaksic mixed for the Heavy Horses set. So you have some Bern Switzerland stuff thrown in there with some 8-track recordings. And that's always been what's impressed me about this, is how Wilson was able to take this album that was recorded in multiple venues, and he made it sound consistent across the board. And I don't know how he was able to pull that off, but it's very impressive. But talking about Tull surround mixes at large, I think maybe LA Forum 1980 is my favorite from the A box set.
That's one of the A set. Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that's cool about that one is Eddie Jobson was in the band for that show, right? And for the A record. So there's definitely some kind of interesting different arrangements of some of the songs when you add his, keyboard synth stuff into it. Yeah, I really like that mix. I think that was probably my favorite part of the A box set, actually. I mean, there's a couple songs I like on the studio record, but it's not like one I would immediately reach for.
Yeah, I get that. I like the A album a lot. It's different. It maybe shouldn't have been released as a Jethro Tull album. It probably was an Ian Anderson solo album, as it was intended to be. But I always think of it as almost like a Zappa-fied Tull record. And the fact that Eddie Jobson is there helps a lot. And the fact that Mark Craney auditioned for Frank before joining Tull adds kind of like a Zappa-esque flavor to it.
Some of the material in that album is really off the wall, like that song Batteries Not Included.
And we get a live version of that too, which I never expected to hear that.
But my favorite tracks are the more straightforward ones, like Crossfire,
sick.
Filingdale Flyer. Yeah.
I'm a Pine Martins man. That's my favorite.
It's a good one too.
Yeah. And the live mix. I like when Ian basically says that, we've never been able to get this right, and, kind of hold your breath. And then they play an absolutely stunningly perfect.
And then you have in the surround version, you could hear like Jobson's, his violin thing going crazy, swirling around the room. So that's a good surround track for sure.
Yeah.
Large jig. Yeah.
And I think he does a violin solo too on that bounces around.
In the live show in the LA Forum, there's like a solo suite section. There's just a track of him doing like an improv solo in the middle of the show. Because I don't know this stuff. I'm more of like a casual Tull fan. Was the LA Forum thing ever released before?
Well, it was a radio broadcast, so it was a bootleg, and there were 2 nights of it.
So there was never an official release of it until
except for on Slipstream. Some of it is on Slipstream. Well, it's the stuff that's on the Slipstream video, like Black Sunday, Skating Away on the Thin Ice of a New Day, Songs from the Wood, and Heavy Horses. And there might have been another track, but that video is taken from the LA Forum. So the whole show was shot as well as recorded, but I think they junked the video master tapes back then. Whatever they didn't use, they just junked them.
Well, I figured if they had them, they probably would have put them on the
exactly. Yeah, they would have put them on there. So the only video that exists is the stuff that's on Slipstream. So yeah, to answer your question, some of it had been released before. But that being said, I swear that there were overdubs on the Slipstream DVD, the VHS tape that came out, that aren't present on the new version, because on Black Sunday, Ian's voice sounds very weathered on that opening track, to me anyway. And I've thought for some time that his vocals were cut in the studio on the VHS tape, and that kind of confirms it.
Well, you were saying like there's a bunch of across the Tull sets. There's a fair amount of live material. There's the Tanglewood set in the benefit box. There's you talked about Carnegie Hall. Yeah, there's something in the Broadsword set too, right?
I was going to mention that, but I'm not 100% where it was recorded, but I want to say Italy. Somewhere
in Europe, as I recall. Yeah.
It's either Germany or Italy, but I think I might be mixing it up with that Jack and the Green Live in Germany DVD. But that's actually one of my favorite mixes as well, because it's a quadraphonic mix. It's a modern quad mix. Because I think that was just a 4-track recording. And that was one of the first times that I really fell in love with the idea of Steven doing very sparse mixes, because he's able to do a lot with basically nothing on that track. And as you know, it's maybe not the best Tull lineup. Like Jerry Conway's really not suited for some of the 70s material that Barry Barlow was on. But it's a very comforting, cozy Tull show. And despite it's got some flaws. Despite its flaws, I actually really, really enjoy it. And it's like very, very relaxing to put that mix on.
All of this goes to say, I think the Tull sets are the gold standard for like putting extras in a box.
Yes.
I mean, I have all of them, and I doubt I've listened to everything that's included in them. It could take years to go through all of it. You could be listening to nothing but Tull for like a year straight and not go through all the material that's in those sets. So
and when those come out, it's like, cancel my plans. I'm not doing anything this weekend. And I listen to them all. I listen to them all front to back, because they're my favorite band. So I'm obsessed with every nuance. We're getting a little bit off topic here, but like when the Chateau de Herville stuff came out on the Passion Play box set, that was a huge deal for me. And as far as multi-channel mixes go, that's one of my favorites, just because it's literally you are a fly on the wall of a Tull recording session. And I don't think there's anything else quite like it.
There's nothing quite like that record. That is definitely a unique one in the catalog.
So I know we kind of cheated and didn't talk a whole lot about Bursting Out.
Well, you talked about it in the best surround albums overall video. So
yes. So we're going to move on to another progressive band. One of your picks.
A more modern progressive band.
Katatonia. Now I've heard of this band.
Yeah, so the typical Katatonia sound, so I believe they're Swedish, is kind of more of a like prog metal kind of thing, but with clean vocals. So kind of like your Dream Theater, or maybe even your heavier Porcupine Tree stuff. I would say
maybe.
Yeah, I would say they fall in that category. But this release, which came out in 2015, was when they went on like a unplugged tour. So they went out just with like mostly acoustic instruments and some like clean lead guitar. And Bruce Sword from the Pineapple Thief sings backing vocals on the tour. And he did the surround version for the video Blu-ray. And it's not like a mega adventurous mix. It's kind of like some of the Steven Wilson ones we talked about, where some of the guitars are mixed further out into the room, but the rest of the band is in the front. But I mean, I'm a sucker for the whole like unplugged thing. And I think the singer in Katatonia has a great voice. So if you like the kind of like moody prog, like if you're a fan of like the Opeth's like Damnation or Heritage records, I think you'll really dig this.
Yep, I love those. Yeah.
And the only other thing I'll add is that I think the Blu-ray is out of print, but the audio only 5.1 mix is on IA. So you can get it there.
Yeah, that's a great service that you offer there. And I didn't ask you to elaborate on it because you talked about it before. But the IAA link to your website is going to be in the description. So for these releases that Jonathan is talking about being IAA exclusives, there will be a link for you to check them out.
Awesome.
All right. I think this is the final of my picks. We're not quite 1-to-1, I think, or maybe we batched some of mine together or something. And I think maybe you have like
I've got two left.
Two. While I can wax poetic about the well, that's a spoiler. But so let's talk about playing the Fool live. And I wanted to take the opportunity because I was a little bit critical of this on my review of it, and I think I was unfair to it. Because when it was announced or teased by Derek Schulman, I assumed it was going to be a Steven Wilson mix. And there is a phenomenal version of the excerpts from Octopus track, the medley, that's included on the Octopus Blu-ray. And it's just like, oh my goodness. It's a dream. It's so beautiful.
And really the only reason they included it is because most of the songs that are in the medley, they didn't have the tapes for the studio versions. So the first two tracks on the Octopus record are up mixes on the surround mix.
I think the Advent of Penurge track sounds fantastic on that. And
the stereo mixes of those albums lend themselves to being run through the software. Like there's a lot of hard panned information. So the Panteo process is only as good as what you put into it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I also think it helps that Wilson's mixes are very respectful of the originals to begin with. They're respectful to the integrity of the originals to begin with. So that it's easy to kind of slot in an up mix with a Wilson mix because he's not doing anything outrageously different. He's not really, it's not really a departure from the originals, but anyway, so that was included because a lot of those tracks, the multi-tracks, didn't exist for the studio versions. However, I think that I was unfair to playing the Fool because I expected it to be a Steven Wilson mix, and I wasn't familiar with Dan Bornmark's work, even though my friend Mike Keneally was like, dude, Bornmark's good. Like you can trust that he'll do a good job with this. And I did hear some of his work on the box set and I thought it was excellent. So there was really no reason to doubt that he, was the right person for this because he's their archivist, right? And he's worked with them since that Scraping the Barrel box set or whatever that set was that he did. But I did find it like I remember at the time I was critical of the fact that Derek's voice is obviously a bit weathered on the tracks that they had to sub because some multi-track tapes were missing, so they had to use different shows and stuff. But listening to it last night, I thought, wow, yeah, I can tell that he's got some gravel to his voice, or he's maybe a little tired, but he's singing his butt off. Like he still sounds great. It's a great performance.
I mean, when I listened to it, like I couldn't believe that they could play these songs live.
Exactly.
Like, the performance is insane.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something about the Atmos separation that picks apart the arrangements in a way that's conducive to it's sort of like, when you do a rock album, you're concerned about maintaining the glue. But this isn't really a traditional rock album. So I feel like you can separate that stuff out and it actually enhances it. But I would point to the 5-man drum feature that's in So Sincere. I think that's correct. Where you have each member of the band in a different speaker. And that's just phenomenal use of this technology. It's like I would point to that as an outstanding example of Atmos, what it's capable of. And I think criticized it for being compressed, and it's definitely more compressed than Wilson's excerpts mixes, but it's not like harsh.
I think that's pretty good.
So for the first time in my career as a YouTube, I hate the word influencer, personality, I'm going to say I was wrong about something. And I think this is a great mix.
I mean, I think if you go in expecting it to sound like the Atmos mix of like Freehand or the 5-1 of Power and the Glory, you're going to be disappointed. Like it's nowhere near as over the top as the live, as the studio records, and nor should it be. It's a live album.
Yeah.
But I think the separation is adequate. I mean, there is a fair amount of activity in the height speakers. Like in On Reflection, the vibes are very clearly in the heights, which is really cool. And the vocals are presented in surround, very much like how they are on the studio cut, where there's each of them in a different corner.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing about it that you didn't mention is that it's the complete recordings.
Yes.
The original,
it's a restoration. It's a restoration of a complete set list. So you get Timing, which is an awesome track from Interview. And
I think Interview is an underrated record.
It's one of the best.
Yeah,
it's one of the best, and it's got a 70s quad mix, which I'm excited to check out. But you get is it Ray Schulman? You get his violin solo in Timing, and there's some cool. It's sort of like we were talking about with the Eddie Jobson thing in the LA Forum set, but you get him like he's playing like these American folk melodies and kind of overlaying them on top of each other, and you can hear the echo in the back, and that's really sick. Like that's some really exciting use of the technology, I feel. And it's rare that I get the opportunity to revise my opinion on something publicly. And I actually think this is great, and it's very enjoyable. Like you said, I don't think it's as complex or zany as maybe some of the Wilson mixes. Like I wanted, to hear the all around. I wanted to hear that bounce like it does in Freehand, but that's not really natural. That's not a natural thing for a live album to do. And the last thing I wanted to add is that this is definitely an example of a live album where you are placed within the space.
Yes.
Three-dimensional space. This is not the band up front and the audience in the back. You are placed within the headspace of this record, almost like you're listening on headphones. But it's like a headphone soundstage converted to your room. So,
and to me, probably the biggest difference between the original 76 mix and the Dan Bornmark one is that there's a lot more of like the venue sound in it. Mm-hmm. Like the original LP is pretty dead sounding.
Yes.
And they seem to have restored a lot of the like sort of ambient information. So it feels more like you're in the venue. So I think that is an improvement over the original.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I listened to my 2005-ish CD as a reference, and I actually think it's a lot harsher sounding than this is. So thumbs up, 2 thumbs up for me.
Yeah, and it's, a cheap standalone. So
yeah, you can get it for like $20. Yeah. And there's like a UK variant and there's a United States variant, so you don't have to import it. I'm all for Gentle Giant.
Long may they continue these reissues.
Yes, yes. All right, and I'm hoping that one day we get a standalone of the first album, because that was a box set exclusive.
Yeah, that's the only one that's in a box set. The first record.
So we mentioned these guys earlier, Tears for Fears.
Yep. And so this is called Songs for a Nervous Planet, and this came out towards the end of 2024. So it's been out for about a year or so. And it's a hybrid like studio and live album. So there's 4 studio tracks at the beginning, which I assume were recorded at the same time as The Tipping Point, which was their last studio album.
It's a very good album too.
It's one of my favorite like comeback records from an old band. And there've been a lot of those in recent years. So I highly recommend that album. But the rest of it is a live recording taken from a concert they did in Franklin, Tennessee in either 2022 or 23. And I actually saw them on this tour. I saw them live at Madison Square Garden in June of 2023. So this is another one where like when I listen to it, I sort of pretend like I'm back at the show because the set list is exactly the same. And they do pretty much all of the Tipping Point record and like a bunch of like older songs. Like, of course, they'll do, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. But the highlight for me is they do a bunch of tracks from the Seeds of Love album. Like they do Woman in Chains and Bad Man's Song.
Nice. Who's covering the woman's vocals, Aletta's? Who's covering Aletta's parts?
They have this backup singer. Her name's Lauren Evans.
Okay.
She's fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah.
They kind of discovered her like singing in some southern town somewhere, and they just kind of threw her on the album in the tour, which is amazing. She's a total star on that material.
Funny enough, I mean, they cut out all the talking between songs for the live album. When I actually saw them live, like Roland told that story
Okay, cool.
before they played Woman in Chains. He was
Nice.
like, "Oh, like we were on tour, we saw this woman playing piano at like a hotel bar." It's crazy.
Yeah, and I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but there is a live performance from the Seeds of Love tour that was released on VHS.
Yeah, it's called like Going to California or something like that.
Yeah, and it's just mind blowing.
They had a huge band for that tour, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like a Zappa size band or something, and I keep hoping that gets reissued one of these days, and with a multi-channel mix, because that would be like my favorite thing ever. I think at least Tears for Fears. I think that would be my favorite Tears for Fears release. But anyway, back to Songs for a Nervous Planet.
So this is they didn't record the video for this, or at least the Blu-ray edition doesn't have video. It's audio only.
Okay.
And I guess because of that, I think Steven Wilson was able to get a bit more adventurous with the Atmos mix. This one is like very similar to the closure / continuation live, and that there's a fair amount of, isolated bits in the height speakers. In Woman in Chains, like the Roland vocal is in the center and the female vocal is elevated above it, which is something that like you wouldn't hear in a concert, but it sounds cool. A lot of the backing vocals are in the height speakers. A lot of like the sort of organ keyboard work is separated out to the sides or back. There's a fair amount of like studio effects flown in from the original versions. Like at the beginning of Seeds of Love, the static sound like that comes out of the back.
That's cool. And
I mean, they're just like on fire on this performance. Like both their voices held up really well. And one of my favorite bands. So
yeah,
highly recommend this one.
I'm going to have to get this because I missed the tipping point in surround, and I don't think that's available anymore. I don't think you can get that anymore.
It's one of those like limited edition SDE releases where they only press like a few thousand of them.
Yeah. Yep. And so this might be a good alternative because I never got the studio album. So yeah, I might check this out at some point. I didn't get the chance to talk about Space Ritual. And I'll just be brief about this. This is not a band that I loved in previous years. I'd heard them. I mean, I was kind of interested in Lemmy and the whole Stasia thing. Like that always seemed really interesting. But I did buy this when it was available as a standalone from Wayside Music. And I thought $20, I'll give this a shot. And I'm a big fan of Stephen W. Taylor's work. There you go. I'm a big fan of Stephen W. Taylor's work with Vandergraaf Generator, Camel,
Bebop Deluxe.
Yeah, and I don't have those yet. I need to grab the like Sunburst finished because that's a great album. But
my favorite is Axe Victim. If you like Ziggy era Bowie, that record's really cool.
Yeah, I've never heard that one, so I would be curious to check those out. But Stephen W. Taylor's one of the absolute greats, and like he worked with Rush in the '80s, which is interesting because he was working with Rupert Hine.
Howard Jones too. He engineered the first two Howard Jones records, which he mixed in surrounds.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those. How long has he been doing the surround mixes?
The first one I remember hearing about was Sunburst Finish, and that was like 2018. I want to say, so relatively recent.
Relatively recently, but yeah, he's done a lot of stuff that I just never thought in a million years I'd get. And, Vandergraaf Generator, for instance, I didn't think anybody would want to touch that in multi-channel.
He seems to have become the guy for these more, let's say, esoteric bands.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, literally, esoteric is the label that puts them out.
That's true, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a perfect way to describe him. I guess if we ever interview him, we'll say the esoteric work of Stephen W. Taylor, but which that would be cool. But back to this album. How do I put this that won't demonetize me? I've never heard a Atmos mix that feels like I've ingested a psychedelic drug before.
Well, it's a 5.1 mix, right?
I'm sorry, a 5.1 mix.
There's Atmos on this. Yeah.
It is so trippy. Like it totally alters my sense of reality and time and space when I put this on because usually the band is kind of up front, but it fills the back speaker. Like he fills the back speakers with all those like ambient synthesizer noises and like, I think Dick Mick, I'm not familiar with the name.
There's a fair amount of things swirling around too, which is always fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of swirling and things moving around, and trippy synthesizer stuff, and it's just like, it's totally disorienting, and I love it. I love it for that. I can just get totally lost in this mix. It rocks like crazy. I mean, if there's maybe one thing I would criticize, it's that I wish we had a little bit more Lemmy. Like, Lemmy's bass presence is maybe not as powerful as I'd like it to be, but yeah, this is phenomenal. And he also did a great job of X in Search of Space, which is maybe my favorite of their studio albums. He made me fall in love with that album completely. So, and we were talking a little bit. He's going to do the Hall of the Mountain Grill album, which has a couple of live performances.
And I think he also did he did the Do Re Mi album,
which has some live material
too. Yeah,
yeah. And I think there's other live performances, live recordings of this in this box set, which I didn't buy because I'm not super hardcore when it comes to Hawkwind, although I did buy the Mountain Grill set. But yeah, I highly recommend this. If you like Jonathan said, like the esoteric side of prog, the more trippy stuff. It's not like when we're talking like prog, it's not like super complex or intricate the way that that maybe Gentle Giant would be. This is closer to Gong. Like I that's who I would relate this to, is like Gong, or even some of the the krautrock bands. Like Can.
Yeah, it's like super vibey. Like, yes. It's not necessarily the most like immaculate recording or even like the most perfect performance, but it's got a vibe to it for sure.
It's so spirited.
I mean, my introduction to them was I got the Warrior on the Edge of Time deluxe set that had the Steven Wilson surround mix. That was the first Hawkwind thing I ever heard. And then there's also the, I think it's called Days of the Underground. Mm-hmm. There's a box set that has 3 other 70s albums that were mixed to 5.1 by Wilson. Those are all pretty cool. So yeah, for such a relatively esoteric band, they have quite a bit out there in surround. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yep. This is another thing that I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we have this material. And you've mentioned the Days of the Underground box a couple times, and that's got to be on my list in very soon before it completely disappears. But we're going to take a hard left turn here.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we can take a harder left turn here. But this is your final pick.
Yeah, my last pick is Joni Mitchell's Miles of Isles, which was a live record that was released between Court and Spark and The Hissing of Summer Lawns. So there are not one, but there are 2 surround mixes of this album. Mm-hmm. There's a Atmos mix that was done by Ken Calais, who was the original recording engineer for the album. And he famously engineered the Fleetwood Mac albums, Rumors and Tusk, all those famous records. And the Atmos mix was originally released to streaming in 2022. And then later on, it was released as part of this box set, the Asylum albums, 4 Blu-ray set. And it turned out when they were sort of compiling material for the box set, they also found there was a quad mix of this album that was done in the 70s that was never issued for some reason. Mm. So there were quad editions of Court and Spark and Hissing of Summer Lawns that were released on LP and 8-track. But for whatever reason, they skipped the live album in the middle. I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's because it was a 2-record set and the cost that had to come with producing them. Yeah. That could be part of it. So they found this long lost unissued quad mix. And the 2 mixes are very different. The Atmos mix is a little more conservative in the sense that there's
interesting.
You feel like the band is wrapping around you, but it's not super distinct in the way things are placed. There's a fair amount of like venue ambience in the height speakers. Like, it sounds good, but my go-to, I would say, is the quad mix.
Yes.
The quad mix is very much like some of the, Elliot Shiner or the Big Big Train record that we talked about before, where there's just like things hard panned in the back speakers. Mm-hmm. Like, the setup it's very simple. The drums are in the front. There's an electric guitar in the left rear speaker, keyboard in the right rear speaker, and then Joni Mitchell's voice is kind of in the middle of all the channels. Mm-hmm. And even on some of the sparser songs, like there's a song called Cold Blue Steel and Sweet Fire. And it's literally just Joni's voice in the front, and there's like a sax in the rear directly behind you. It's centered in the rear speakers. So I think it's really cool. They found this previously unreleased quad mix, and I think it sounds fantastic.
It sounds like a modern mix to me, because I bought that Quadio set, because Rhino just did the Labor Day sale, and my birthday's coming up, so it's like, hey, time to get it. And I've heard this maybe once, but I really enjoyed it. And what I liked is, like you were saying, like the whole like center of the album is basically just Joni solo. But I like how they used the quad placement to kind of fill out the other band members. It's sort of like in the same way that Stop Making Sense experiments with that, but you feel like, it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz, when you have like the black and white portion of the film and then it opens up into color. Like that's a very similar effect. Because I think you have like roughly one album's worth of band material and one album's worth of Joni solo, but it's bookended. The band stuff bookends the album, which is a really interesting choice. But I highly enjoyed this album, and I've been a fan of Joni's material for a long time, even though I'm not like a super fan. I don't know every single thing, even though I have the various box sets. I don't have an excuse, but this is great. And I'm looking forward to hearing The Hissing of Summer Lawns again, because I heard it on streaming in Atmos, and I'm real curious to hear that quad mix soon. So
yeah,
good choice.
I mean, like you, I kind of just sort of knew like her hits. Like I had heard like Free Man in Paris or like Big Yellow Taxi. Yeah. And I didn't really kind of explore the records until I got this set. And I think all four albums are great. I mean, there's a sort of big difference. They sort of, the first album, For the Roses, is more of like a kind of solo. It's more like the Blue record, where it's just her playing piano or acoustic guitar. And there's a couple of band tracks that have more elements. And then by the time you get to The Hissing of Summer Lawns, like there are parts of it that are almost kind of proggy.
Yeah.
It's a pretty experimental record. Like there's this song called The Jungle Line, where there's like a drum loop. I would say that's easily my favorite of the four records.
I think I read that's an early example of sampling.
Yeah.
Because it was like an indigenous recording or something that she took and looped, and then there's some like Moog synthesizer work, but it's very experimental for her. And speaking of the prog thing, like there's the long track on that, Harry's House Centerpiece.
Yes.
Where she does like the jazz standard in the middle of it. But that's very prog. Like it feels like she's taking you on a journey, and she definitely went more in that direction on albums like Don Juan's Reckless Daughter with
Hejira.
Yes. Yeah. But I was going to mention Paprika Plains as being one of my very favorite Joni songs. And if multi-tracks exist for that, please, Atmos gods, give me Paprika Plains. That's all I ask.
Well, Jaco Pastorius played on those albums, right?
Yes.
Those like late 70s ones. Yeah.
She was getting, that's something to mention, is that she uses the same rhythm section on these albums and this live album as Frank Zappa used on Hot Rats, John Guerin and Max Bennett. But what I was reading was that she was getting frustrated with rock musicians, and somebody had said, well, hey, why don't you try jazz players? So she started hiring all these Weather Report dudes, and that gave those late 70s albums a totally different feel. And speaking of live albums, like I think Shadows and Light would make an excellent multi-channel mix, if you've ever heard that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it would be like. Asylum Albums Part 2 would be the next set. Yeah. No, I would be down for that for sure.
Yeah, we need those albums. But was there anything else you want to add to this? This is a great one to end on, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's the only 70s quad we picked for our lists.
Well, that's a good segue, because we're going to do 70s quad mixes next, right?
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Well, Jonathan, it's been a real pleasure, and we went on a little bit longer than expected, but I guess some snipping and editing. And I don't know, maybe we'll release it as multiple parts, or maybe it'll just be a 2.5 hour video. I don't know. But once again, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to whatever we do next.
Same to you.
All right, man. Appreciate it. And for viewers at home, don't forget to like and subscribe, comment, tell us everything that we made a mistake on. Tell us what we're wrong about. What did we forget? Let us know. That's what it's there for. Yeah, look forward to hearing from you. All right. Bye-bye.